In early 2024, three skyscrapers sitting abandoned in the middle of downtown Los Angeles became known across the country. This was mainly after they were taken over by graffiti artists and vandals. But the towers also stand as a failed condo project, one which had been in a state of development for almost 2 decades. When construction finally did go vertical, the project would ultimately stall after over $1 billion had been spent. What's up guys, my name is Jake, and in this 93rd episode of Abandoned, let's dive into the story behind these now infamous towers, and see what the future might hold for them. This is Oceanwide Plaza. Today's episode of Abandoned is sponsored by Incogni. Use code BRIGHTSUN at the link below to get an exclusive 60% off a 1-year plan. It all started with a very valuable parcel of land adjacent to the Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles. The property, which is around 4.6 acres, was primarily being used for parking, oftentimes filled when games and events were happening at the stadium. But it was also land in the middle of downtown Los Angeles, meaning it was very valuable and just waiting for density. That density proposal would ultimately come after a New York-based real estate firm would acquire the land for $80 million in mid-2006. A year later, in the summer of 2007, they would officially announce the project, a large mixed-use development called Figueroa Central, also known as Fig Central. The project would also later go by the name LA Central. The proposal called for 2 towers, one 45 stories tall and the other 33. Around 860 condo units and another 220 hotel rooms would populate the vast square footage, while the podium of these 2 towers would be a sizable retail and entertainment complex, all complete with large LED screens lining the streets below. While the concepts perhaps looked a little generic, it was still adding density to the city, as well as pedestrian-oriented amenities on the ground levels. But due to the sheer size of the development, it wasn't going to be cheap. The estimated cost to see this complex through was around $700 million. And yep, it was 2007, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. While the project was approved, and with the city eagerly hoping it would be built to help with their overall plan of a downtown renaissance, the reality was that 2008 was just a difficult year to find money. Despite walls going up around the site and developers stating in August of 2007 that they were merely just 3 weeks away from an official groundbreaking, well, that date would come and pass with no official work. This was while the budget for the total build-out was inflated to around $1 billion. By October of 2008, though, it was officially announced that they were unable to secure financing and officially put the project on hold. Shortly after, the construction walls came down and the property returned to being a parking lot. And this is how it would sit for the next half-decade. Really no development progress in sight. This was until August of 2014, when it was reported in the Chinese press that a domestic company would be acquiring the property and the development in Los Angeles. The company was called Oceanwide Real Estate International, part of the Oceanwide Holdings Company, and the sale was made official and public in late 2014. They purchased the unfinished development for around $200 million. Instead of starting from scratch, the new developers would be adapting the original Fig Central design. Instead of 2 towers though, they would be opting for 3 shorter ones, but they would be keeping many of the original design features and just modernizing them. At the base of these towers would be a large commercial galleria with suspended walkways and entertainment venues mixed in. Oceanwide would also have 504 luxury condo units, and within the tallest tower would be a luxury hotel, itself having around 183 hotel rooms. Hyatt would later sign on to the project and flag this hotel as an ultra-luxury Park Hyatt. In fact, Hyatt would actually come on and brand the entire tower as a luxury residences tied to the Park Hyatt name. They had planned a host of 1 to 3 bedroom ultra luxury condos to go on sale, with lots of luxury amenities to go along with it. Closer to street level would be a massive 32,000 square foot continuous LED screen that flows around the podium of the complex. On the top of the podium would be a vast amenities floor for the condos, with pools, a jogging track, and lush gardens. The whole project would build out around 1.5 million square feet of mixed-use, high-end square footage downtown, and it was one of the most anticipated projects that was currently in development. At a cost of well over $1 billion, Oceanwide Plaza was quickly approved and now had an opening date of 2019. This development was just one of several Chinese real estate companies coming in to develop large projects in America. Oceanwide was the largest in active development in LA, and from the city's perspective, at least this time they were serious about shovels going into the ground. Finally, after nearly a decade of stalled promises on the site, Oceanwide Plaza would host a groundbreaking ceremony on March 19, 2015. Immediately after, work began with clearing the site and starting the excavation. For many, this was an exciting project, and a year after groundbreaking, vertical construction began. Through 2016 and 17, the towers slowly rose over the Staples Center, becoming new landmarks amongst the Los Angeles skyline. By 2018, all 3 towers had been topped off, with much of the glass cladding now in place. By the looks of it, Oceanwide Plaza was nearing completion. But behind the scenes, there were looming issues. Observers of the construction project began circling a rumor in July of 2018 that the developers may be in financial trouble, and that construction had seemingly paused. While the site was reportedly dormant for a few days, Oceanwide came out and denied the rumors. Sure enough, construction had picked back up. But these rumblings of financial difficulties wouldn't go away. And if anything, the rumors would be supercharged after Oceanwide Holdings, the developer behind the project, announced that they would temporarily pause construction in January of 2019. This was due to a recapitalization of the project, basically meaning they were internally shifting around debt to free up cash for the development. But this was a very real sign that there were issues at the company, and despite work resuming, it was only temporary. While they did pay off some liens towards the property, in late 2019, one of the main contractors sued the developers and exited the project after they claimed that Oceanwide failed to pay them over $40 million. Across the Pacific, where the developers for this project were based, well, their real estate economy wasn't doing so hot. The trade war between the US and China had made investing in America difficult. This was especially true after China imposed restrictions to try and save their own crumbling markets. Real estate investment within the US from China had shot down dramatically. But Oceanwide Plaza was nearly finished, and just needed one last push to complete the interiors. Oceanwide as a company, though, was struggling. They apparently originally had planned to finance the majority of the project themselves. However, since groundbreaking, the company had faced significant financial problems. They were also stretching themselves thin, as the LA development wasn't their only high-profile project. Oceanwide also had a massive tower plan for San Francisco, which they had already broken ground on, but halted soon after. Likewise was the case for their super tall skyscraper planned for New York City, which, I'm not kidding, also happens to be on a site practically right next to 161 Maiden Lane, which is the still abandoned leaning skyscraper I talked about in an earlier episode of Abandoned. All of these projects were put on hold as Oceanwide scrambled to find money to fund their foreign mega developments. While this was all happening, years would pass with no activity at the site. The massive complex was more or less abandoned directly in the middle of Los Angeles, looming over the streets as perhaps the largest ghost project in the entire country. Ultimately, Oceanwide filed for bankruptcy in one of its territories, specifically Bermuda. With the developers' hardships seemingly unshakable in the short term, they began listing their developments up for sale, Oceanwide Plaza being one of them. The developers themselves depicted a nihilistic view on the realities of the project. In 2022, they claimed that the site would need an additional 2 years and another $1 billion to actually finish the project. But still, with no sale by 2023, the owners failed to pay nearly $160 million worth of construction loans. In the meantime, the 3 massive towers continued to sit abandoned. This, of course, enraged both citizens and local leaders, correctly calling it an unacceptable monument of blight during a housing crisis. While public debates and legal cases were being made, people began finding their way inside. Because the site was so massive and they had such little security there, over the years, people were starting to get inside the massive complex. Some of those who did would then post videos from the inside of the development, scaling the abandoned cranes, and even base jumping from the towers. As this gained more and more media coverage, taggers then began finding their way in. In late 2023, 3 graffiti artists got into the tallest of the 3 towers, what was going to be the Park Hyatt. They spray painted their names across the relatively new floor-to-ceiling windows. This was the start of a community-wide effort to get into the towers, and over the course of a few months, the word got out. By February, this was supercharged by the sudden influx of media coverage. In a matter of just 24 hours, the towers were covered with large graffiti block letters, adorning the glass on almost every balcony on almost every floor. In just a few days after this, nearly every tower had been covered. The city responded by cracking down on this, sending LAPD to better case the property and arresting those who were on site. At least 12 different people would be arrested in a very short period of time. Perhaps, though, it did go a little too far, as the force would then send out helicopters to catch taggers in the act. I'm sure a worthwhile use of taxpayer money. Regardless, the story captured the interest of millions, not only in California, but across the country. And it's easy to see why. While visibly abandoned towers adorned with graffiti are not all that unheard of in large American cities, it is pretty unprecedented for a modern complex, especially one at this size, to be left like this. Much of it covers the brand new materials, the glass and other cladding, the freshly poured concrete. All of it was just left there and now tagged over. I mean, it really is pretty shocking. It's perhaps the most evident and visual way to show its abandonment. When I covered 161 Maiden Lane in New York with its large graffiti scaling the top few floors of the tower, I thought that was insane. Then I saw what was happening with Oceanwide Plaza, and I was genuinely stunned. But I've known about Oceanwide Plaza for a while. My friends have lived in the buildings around it and have given me live updates through its existence. In fact, the wrap party for my feature documentary, Closed for Storm, was held on the rooftop right next to them. So when I actually saw what was happening with these towers now, I was genuinely stunned. The city was too, and clearly were embarrassed by the whole situation and the optics of these massive unfinished towers in the middle of downtown. They're just a few steps away from the now named Crypto.com Arena and the towering Ritz-Carlton, so it's safe to say that the city wanted to wipe this from the skyline. In late February 2024, the city voted to allocate nearly $4 million to go in and clean up the towers. Aside from putting up a perimeter fence, this money has yet to be spent, and there has been no effort to clean up the property. So to this very day, the development is left in an abandoned state, clearly in rough condition from the constant break-ins earlier in the year. Most accessible surfaces across the development, and even some harder to access points, have been covered in graffiti. Construction materials and equipment also remain dormant on the site, with the exterior elevators still in place. Torn construction netting litters the scaling concrete monolith, while the Oceanwide banner still hangs in place, but just barely. It's a very symbolic representation of the developers and the projects. Really, the whole site appears to be disheveled, with clearly no activity in it for a while. Speaking of those developers though, they were still being sued by the subcontractors for unpaid work. The largest of which was Lend-Lease, who said that Oceanwide were still delinquent on around $200 million. But the development companies still own the towers, and with all of this debt owed, they once again put the unfinished development up for sale. While the property's assessed value from the state put it at just $400 million, the team tasked to sell the property in May of 2024 said that they had had offers well past that figure, some even reaching $1 billion. The agents claimed that a new buyer would be locked in by the end of 2024, with hopes that they would salvage what was there and have it finished within 4 years. As for Oceanwide Holdings, well, the company still exists, but has been in serious trouble. Their stock was delisted from the Hong Kong stock market after it had crashed, and the company has still been trying to get out of their US-based real estate projects. Not only is the LA project sitting abandoned, but so is the early foundation work for the San Francisco Oceanwide Center project. But when you look back at all of this, it is a pretty astonishing story. The project started all the way back in 2006, meaning this development across 2 different developers has been in the works for nearly 2 decades. But what's even more insane is that both these developers had failed. And that's just so hard to believe when so much money had been spent to make this project a reality. Unfortunately, that reality was a whole lot different than anyone had originally visioned. And as a result of geopolitical financial tension and a foreign developer likely being spread too thin, Oceanwide Plaza continues to sit as a stark reminder of that failure. While its unprecedented scale is pretty striking for an abandoned building, and I'm sure many are sick of it being there like that, I also tend to think that it is a blank canvas now being fully utilized. It is kind of an interesting art piece in itself. and perhaps that's the best representation of Los Angeles there is. But now there is new hope for a new developer to take the reins and see this project through to the end. But then you have to consider who will be willing to not only inherit someone else's older design, but the sheer cost to replace all of the materials that had either sat there for years or that was vandalized beyond saving. It's going to be interesting to see what happens here. But until a buyer is found or the city acts on it, only time will tell what will ultimately happen to Oceanwide Plaza. Personal data privacy is super important for everyone. So it is worrying that just by going about your normal day online, your personal data is being collected and sold through data brokers. It's honestly a really enraging process that not only exposes your privacy, but also can lead to spam phone calls and spam emails. I've always been very paranoid and worried about this, and of course have experienced the end results of it. But that's all changed for me as I've been using this video's sponsor, Incogni. Incogni simplifies the process of submitting requests to have your personal data removed. Something that can be daunting and outright tedious. But it's also a process that these data brokers just hope you do nothing about. With Incogni, all you need to do is sign up, grant them access to remove your data on behalf of you, and simply just watch the process. Since I signed up with them earlier this year, they've suppressed over 81 data broker sites, saving me nearly 60 hours of my time if I were to do it myself. Overall, I just now have some more peace of mind that Incogni is taking care of my privacy. So it's a great service that makes personal data management incredibly simple. Plus, it's very affordable, which makes the deal that much sweeter. That's especially true when you use the link incogni.com/brightsun at the link below and use my code BRIGHTSUN, which will get you an exclusive 60% off a 1-year plan. Anyway guys, my name is Jake, and thank you very much for watching.